Hey, how's it? I'm Dan, and I have this YouTube channel about like doing stuff that I like to do. And it only occurred to me recently for some reason that one thing that I really love to do, but kind of like reading books and reading comics and stuff that I like in concept, I adore, I have a passion for it in concept, but I don't have a ton of time to really like sit down and devote and indulge in these things that I love to do as much as I would if I had that time. But one thing I've discovered from getting this YouTube channel up and running again is that it's been a great excuse and motivator to find the time and make the time to do some of this stuff that I don't get to do as often as I'd like. So yeah, gaming, I love it. Now, I wouldn't by any means call myself any kind of modern gamer. I do teach modern gaming design. I'm an educator and I work with Unity and Unreal as part of my curriculum, but I really haven't been able to keep up with current gaming for the past like 20 years or so. So that's why I call this like retro gaming. I don't think of retro gaming as retro gaming because I don't feel like I'm retro. To me, it is just gaming. It's the gaming I grew up with. And I don't care how modern and glossy and like good the graphics are and how intricate and convoluted the gameplay is. To me, like a video game is a video game, no matter how small and simple or big and epic in scope it is. They all serve similar purposes for storytelling and entertainment and escapism, but I know that the games from my generation are considered retro now, so I'll go with that moniker just to be friendly for the algorithm. All right, so the reason I'm making this video as my inaugural gaming video as opposed to just going straight into playing, I just wanted to give a quick history and backstory and context for my gaming story and journey so I don't have to waste time with that in future videos. So I was a young kid in the 80s and I had my more formative time growing up in the 90s. So though I do remember having an original Atari and I remember having something like some Texas Instrument computer with floppy disks. I mean like the floppy disk, like the old kind, that had some like really simple basic block games on them. And I do remember having that infamous, pointless, maddening E.T. game on Atari. I remember that. But like most kids in my generation, my first real like console exposure was a Nintendo. I remember a friend got one probably like in 3rd grade and we bugged my parents endlessly for one, and I'm pretty sure that the way we got our first Nintendo, when I say me, I mean me and my twin brother Dave, who you can see on a lot of other stuff on my channel and podcast and things. It's hard for me to separate out my experiences from my childhood individually because I had a twin and we were interested in all the same stuff, so we did all the things together all the time. So I see my childhood as sort of an us thing, not just a me thing. But if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure that my uncle out in Arizona had a original Nintendo and wasn't really playing it very much, so my mom had clandestinely got it from him and gave it to my brother and me for Christmas in our 4th grade year, I'm pretty sure. And then sometime in the next few years, we got a Super Nintendo and a Sega Genesis. So those 3 cartridge systems were like my main formative years of gaming. And that's probably going to be the bulk of stuff that I'm going to at least start with on this section of my channel, is those 8-bit and 16-bit cartridge systems that I actually had and spent the most time with as a kid. But then I remember sometime around late middle school, maybe even early high school, the PlayStation 1 came out, and that's when my brother and I decided to trade in all of our cartridge systems because we had our hearts set on playing Final Fantasy VII and we didn't care what we had to sacrifice to get it. Unfortunately, that was around the same time the teenness started to take over my life and my mindset, and my attention went elsewhere. And I remember playing Final Fantasy VII for a few hours, and for some reason, just at that age, I just was like kind of over it. And from that point on, I never really got any new systems. I didn't really keep up with what was going on in the gaming world. I was always kind of adjacently interested in it, and I always, of course, knew people and had friends and roommates and cats that did keep up with the times and kept getting new systems as they came out, including my brother. So I was so familiar with what was going on, and every once in a while I would sit down and play Halo or Resident Evil or something like that with friends. But I remember it was around the N64 time and the PlayStation time that I started to get just kind of overwhelmed with all of the 3D options with the joystick. I had been previously so comfortable with just a few buttons, limited options. I am kind of a simpleton when it comes to these things. I'm pretty sure it was GoldenEye on 64, and having tried Mario 64 at some point, that I just had felt so like out of practice and out of the know that having buttons on the front and the top and multiple joysticks was just too much for me. But I also remember in late high school though, when we still had dial-up internet, so this is like late 90s, early 2000s, my brother exposed me to early online gaming, which is like a no-brainer at this point, but he was playing stuff like Ultima Online, back then. And the fact that he could like log in and really, really slowly and frustratingly move around and talk to people from around the world was just kind of crazy to me. So I definitely wouldn't say that I like rejected gaming or was like over it and too cool for it by any means at any point. Let's just say that it kind of went like dormant for me for a long time. But then when I was in college, I was really wistful. I got a Super Nintendo and it came with just like a bunch of random games, but it luckily had the two that I wanted the most, which was Mario Kart and Final Fantasy VI, or 3, depending on which release you got. So while my roommates were playing like Xbox and PlayStation 2 and PC gaming and being all cool, I was over in my room playing my old 16-bit favorites and having a blast. Several years later, I ended up selling that system because I was in a bit of a desperate everything goes mentality, because I was trying to quickly leave the island of Maui that I was living on at the time. I regret being so impulsive, but hindsight's 20/20 always. But one reason I left Maui in 2011 was because I was starting a family. So a few years later, when my son was old enough to start playing games, that whole thing was kind of like reinvigorated. Especially for younger kids though, it was mostly mobile stuff to start. But eventually he got into like Minecraft, Roblox, and all that kind of stuff. And more recently like Among Us and of course Fortnite. So again, even though I haven't really been able to devote a lot of time playing games, between my teaching of 3D design and gaming and world building and stuff like that, and then my son and his constantly burgeoning interest in video games, I've had a bit of a reawakened interest and more exposure to the whole world than I've had in a long time. So that leads me to a few years ago, I met somebody that works in the gaming industry and I was able to get hooked up with like a whole bunch of systems and games that span the whole, what we call retro now, like basically from the beginning of gaming, like even pre-Atari and arcade stuff, up to about N64 and a little bit of PlayStation 1. So it was so exciting to not only get like one system, but the opportunity to like indulge in a whole bunch of stuff that I never even knew existed. Not just games, but consoles too. So I have this huge collection of hardware and software that reflects like my complete formative time of my youth gaming time. But like I originally said, I barely had the time to sit down and do it. And then it just hit me a few weeks ago, like if I make videos revisiting some of this stuff, but also exploring things that I wasn't even aware of when I was growing up, it would give me motivation and just like a blanket excuse to finally just sit down and play video games. Like I often think about, but don't usually feel like I have the time to. So for right now, my gaming videos aren't gonna be like live streams, they're not gonna be reviews, they're not gonna be full playthroughs or anything like that. My plan right now, especially because of the time consideration, is to just make some short and sweet nostalgia trip videos, revisit some of my favorites, relay some of the stories and context that it brings up for me. But like I said, I have like so much extra stuff that it's super overwhelming. I hope to eventually just start picking things at random and seeing what happens. So thanks for being with me as I start this series and go to the next level of my gaming journey. Let's play.